Former Kings player and current analyst Daryl Evans joins us to talk about the Kings in the playoffs and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast. It's a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $20 off your first purchase. Well, the LA Kings will close out the regular season on Thursday at home against the Chicago Blackhawks before heading into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Former Kings winger and current analyst Daryl Evans is nice enough to join us once again to talk about the season and the upcoming playoffs. You can follow him on X, Twitter, at Daryl Evans 15. Hey, Daryl, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Always a pleasure to talk with you, Eddie. Doing great. Playoff time is upon us, and it's always a fun time of year.
I've been talking lately about the Kings and how they've been playing going into the playoffs and talking about playing the right way. And it's hard to just kind of flip a switch on once you get to playoff time. But I will also admit the NHL playoffs can be a completely different season, and the regular season doesn't necessarily translate. Look back to last year. Boston was amazing in the regular season, and they lose in the first round of the playoffs. So where do you stand on this? Is it important for a team to be playing a certain way going into the playoffs, or because the playoffs are such a different season, is that not as important as maybe it would seem?
Well, it is a different thing. I think, once you do get to postseason play, you erase what happened during the regular season, regardless of how well you did, or you just snuck in on the last day. That really doesn't matter. And again, it goes to show, like with Boston last year, the type of year that they had, the best in the history of the National Hockey League, it sure didn't translate into postseason play. But, I think you want to try to play the game the way you'd like to see your team play in the postseason, not establish any bad habits. You want to have good habits, but it's also difficult. I know a lot of people have looked at the Kings schedule and said it's been a favorable schedule going into the postseason, but in some ways it's a more challenging schedule. You're looking at opponents that have already been eliminated from the playoff race, and they come in, you look at their teams are very relaxed. In some cases, they've got guys that have been called up and they're auditioning for jobs for next year. So there's a whole different element out there. So I think there's more of a mental challenge in that regard as opposed to the physical challenge. And then at this time of year, you want to try and stay as healthy as you can going in. So it's really tough. But I think, especially teams that have been around for a few years, that have had a core of players that have been together for a while, they know what they need to do. I think in practice, coaches will sense that they're getting what they need out of some of the drills that they're doing. And again, you can't just turn a switch. You still have to establish those habits. And I think with the structure that the Kings played with all year, I think that's something that we'll see come out in postseason a lot more than we've seen maybe in the last couple of games.
Well, the Kings have one game left in the regular season. They are 5-5 in their last 10 going into this season finale, and 7 of those games were against non-playoff teams. The last 2, you had a win over the Ducks and then a loss to the Wild. And how do you feel about how the Kings are playing right now as we head into the playoffs?
Well, I think, the last few games in particular, a little bit difficult. Last week, they walked into Anaheim with a chance to clinch. Anaheim, on the other hand, wanted to play the role of spoiler, and they did. Kings got off to a good start for maybe the first 7 minutes in the hockey game. And then they may have thought, because they, were up a goal, that it was going to be an easy night. And to Anaheim's credit, they battled hard. And again, a lot of young players that are auditioning, and they fell short in that game, and they were outplayed in that game. They battled back, reestablished themselves in the game against Calgary, secured themselves a postseason spot, and then I thought last game they backed off a little bit again, and not that that's what you want to see, but again, you have to credit Minnesota. I thought they played hard. They took advantage of a situation. I think the Kings are their best when they're engaged physically. And I think a couple of the games recently haven't been nearly as physical as you expect at this time of year, especially when you look at the games the week before when they're playing Vancouver, the physicality in those games. There's a lot of intensity there. And I think maybe that has lacked a little bit in the last couple of games. But I think they'll be dialed in for tomorrow night's game, the close out the regular season, being on home ice, being against Chicago. And I think with the light at the end of the tunnel being the postseason starting in a few days, it's kind of a little bit of a relief that is finally here.
As you mentioned, one more regular season game, Chicago on Thursday. You'll be on the call along with Nick Nixon and Jim Fox. Maybe give me a couple of things you'd like to see from the Kings in that game.
I'd like to see them establish pace in the game, get their forecheck going. I think in the last few games, they've been a little bit playing on the perimeter, get back inside the dots, a little bit more traffic around the net, just attention to detail in their game, both offensively and defensively. I don't think they've been bad the last few games. It's just there's just been a little bit of urgency and desperation lacking in those games. So I'd like to see that urgency and desperation established right from the get-go and try to play as complete of a 60-minute game to carry them into the postseason.
The Kings at times have gone with that 11 forward, 7 defense lineup. At other times, it's been that 12-6 setup. Maybe what are some of the pros and cons of those two different setups? And is it possible you think we could see maybe both of those come playoff time?
I would think they'd revert back to the 12-6. I think, going down the stretch, when you're battling to get yourself into a postseason play, I think there's some ways to look at it that you can maybe get some of your top end guys a little bit more ice time. It does kind of throw the lines off a little bit. I think when it comes to postseason play, I think you want to be able to rotate 4 lines with some rhythm out there. And guys are going to get plenty of ice. There's more of a physical demand when it comes to postseason. Having the 7D out there, what that does is it kind of spreads the minutes out a little bit and gives you some versatility of maybe some left-hand shot, right-hand shot pairings on different lines. But I think when it comes to postseason play, I think we're going to see more of the traditional 12-6, and that'll be that the Kings will be healthier as well. I think for the most part, one of the reasons was that is they weren't healthy. They had injuries through the course of the year that kind of maybe forced them into that situation. When the coaching staff saw the results that they were getting, I think they were pleased with it and felt comfortable doing it. So I think everybody's familiar playing with each other, regardless of what line you're on, and whether it's 11-7, 6-12. I think the Kings will find a way, but look for 12-6 in the postseason.
Is there anything specifically from a team standpoint for the Kings, maybe the power play, for example, that you think needs to be above average, I guess, for the Kings to have some playoff success?
I would say probably 5-on-5 play. I think their power plays have established themselves well since the break. The Kings power play has been number 1 on home ice there. The penalty kill has been up amongst the top all season, so I think that's dialed in pretty good. 5-on-5, just a little bit more consistency in that regard. Some depth scoring. We've seen guys like Byfield who hasn't scored for a while. Not that he's not playing well. I'd like to see more consistency of Dubois in the postseason and just get some contributions from the bottom 6. I think in the early part of the year when the Kings got off to a really good start, they were getting contributions throughout their lineup. So if they can get a little bit more from the bottom 6 and get their defense to be able to contribute, if the Kings get to that magical number of scoring 3 goals a game, they're going to win a lot of games in the postseason.
Just getting started with Daryl Evans. We're going to ask him specifically about Quinton Byfield and a couple of the other Kings players heading into the playoffs. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to the next big event. I don't, because I use Gametime. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. I've used Gametime to buy tickets this year to NHL and NFL games. The app is very easy to navigate. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and the best price guaranteed. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. I love that you can view the view that you're going to get before you buy the ticket, so you know exactly what you're going to see when you arrive. And Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. All-in prices show you the total up front. You know exactly what you're going to get without any hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps on the app. Just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We continue with former LA Kings winger and analyst Daryl Evans. And Daryl, What do you think about Pierre-Luc Dubois playing on the fourth line, which we've seen in a few games lately? And I know in practice today he was skating on the fourth line as well.
I don't look at it as first, fourth, second, third. I just look at it as combinations out there. I think in the NHL right now, you need to have all four lines contributing. You can give them numbers however way you want them. We asked Jim Hiller about the minutes and where guys are in the lineup and things like that, and he said if you look at the 5-on-5 play, the minutes are pretty evenly distributed up amongst the centermen. When you talk about guys like Dubois and that, it's the special teams. He's not on the penalty kill for the most part. He's on the second power play unit, so that's where his numbers maybe are a little bit slighter than where some people expect them to be. But you need that depth, and it's a matter of combinations. You've got 12 forwards. You've got pairings of guys like Kopitar and Kempe that have been together for a while. Danault, Moore, Danault, Arvidsson, Demore, Moore, Arvidsson, all three of them together. So you go with combinations that you know what you've already got there. And I still think at this time of year, even though you've played 82 games, you're still looking for some magic. You might find something by putting different combinations together. And when it comes to the postseason, it's the way you match up, whether you're at home, you're on the road. It might free up a guy like Quentin Byfield that's now down on another line as opposed to playing with Kopitar. Maybe he gets himself into more situations that he can thrive upon, get his confidence back, so to speak. But I think wherever you put the guys out there, you need them to contribute. And, the NHL is a different game than it used to be 20 years ago. Your third and fourth line guys were dump and chase. That's not the case anymore. You look at the skill that's in the bottom six forwards. These guys are all capable of scoring 15 goals a year. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that depth and balance. The more you can utilize four lines, 6D in the playoffs, the more success and the deeper you're going to go.
You mentioned Quentin Byfield. Obviously, he's had a big season setting career highs across the boards. But as we are recording this, he has gone 19 games without a goal, 9 games now without a point. And for you kind of touched on it, but for people that don't know, he was in practice earlier today on the fourth line with Pierre-Luc Dubois. Anything you're seeing differently from Q lately, or any reason for concern at all?
No need for concern. I think the big thing right now is he's lacking confidence. He's lacking that swagger that he had in the early part of the year. For the most part, he's doing the little things, getting in there on the forecheck, taking the body, keeping plays alive with his reach. I think when a player is playing confident, they're a step quicker because you eliminate the thinking of a game. When athletes think, that's when they get themselves in trouble. When you question yourself, you get yourself in trouble. Even if it's making a mistake, you want to make that mistake at 100 miles an hour because generally you'll be able to recover from it. So I think right now he's looking for a break. And I know the guys that he's been on the ice with, they're encouraging him to shoot the puck as much as he possibly can. And I think it's just a couple of games, put a couple of pucks in the back of the net, that'll change for him. So putting him down, in the lineup, taking him away from, when you play with Kopitar and Kempe, you're getting, top matchup against the other team's opponents every night. You're getting the best defensive pairing, and you're getting their top forward. So maybe just a little different matchup for him, different chemistry. You bring a little different element to the game, but I don't think there's a need to, for any crazy concern. Of course, the Kings would like to see more production out of him. He wants more production out of himself. And if the Kings get that, he gets that, that makes the Kings a better team. But I'm sure he'll be the player that the Kings would hope you play. You got to remember, he's still 21 years old, and he's going to continue to have those peaks and valleys. And then eventually he'll be where he consistently plays at his top of his game night in and night out for a lot of years.
The Kings recently welcomed back Victor Arvidsson into the lineup after missing most of the season with back surgery. He's played the last 13 games. What have you seen from him as far as making the Kings a bit different, more dangerous, both 5-on-5 and on the power play?
Immediate impact, just the energy that he brings. He brings his teammates into the battle. Leads by example, vocal. He's always chirping out there in the locker room. He's a spark plug, tenacious player. He leads by example when he's on the ice. He gets under the opponent's skin a little bit, and that draws his team into it. Having a right-handed shot on the power play, having a bumper down there, that's definitely made a difference on the Kings' power play since his return. And he also allows guys to be able to slot up, get in the right position. You see guys that have been elevated, not that they can't do it, but you see guys that are normally on your third and fourth unit playing on that second unit. Yeah, they get a little bit more ice time. They have a few good games. But having a veteran player with the experience that Arvidsson has and the skill set that he has with the mentality, you can't replace guys like that. So they welcome him back with open arms. And the opponents look differently upon the Kings when he's in the lineup. They know the battle is going to be that much greater knowing that he's on the ice.
A couple of younger guys I wanted to ask you about. We saw Akil Thomas come up briefly and have quite a spark. I know he's been sent down on loan to Ontario, and Alex Turcotte has now been brought back into the lineup, and certainly he's gotten a good taste of the NHL this year. Just talk about the experience those two players have gotten of late and what it could mean for their careers, if not for a role in the playoffs this year, then maybe for next season.
Yeah, it's been great this year to see both those guys get in the lineup and play for the Kings. For Akil, his first time, the success that he's had, scoring, like he did, a few goals in the games that he played. I think the big thing for those two players was to find a way to play consistently this year. Both have been hampered by injuries in the early part of their careers. So to play healthy and get a year in has paid dividends for the growth of them. I think the Kings have a better understanding now that these guys can play in the NHL, and we all know that you can come up and you can have a few games here and there. It's doing it consistently. Akil Thomas, more mature, a few years in before he gets his game, but I think probably at the end of the day might be a blessing in disguise because the greater appreciation of the work that he put in to get here, understands how hard it is here. So now when he goes back to Ontario, you look at him become a leader down there, as opposed to maybe somebody that is mad they got sent down, that thinks they don't deserve it. He knows what it takes to get back up, and he's in the Kings picture. So with those two guys, Turcotte and Thomas, those are future players with the Kings, and whether they get a chance to play this year in the postseason, only time will tell. But as we move forward, I think the Kings definitely feel a lot better about those two guys than maybe 12 months ago when they weren't sure, where they were injury-wise and whether or not they were going to be able to get into the NHL. But I think those a lot of those questions have been answered.
And from a couple of young guys to two old veterans, Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty continue to get it done. Who knows how many more chances they'll get at the playoffs, hopefully several more. But just Drew Doughty still playing the minutes he plays and the key role that he plays. And Anze Kopitar, of course, on both ends of the ice, still playing at such a high level. Are you amazed at how well these two guys continue to perform year after year for the Kings?
Yeah, it really has been, such a treat to be able to watch these guys develop from the young kids when they came in, the baby-faced kids, and then now the leaders that they are and all the things that they've been able to accomplish, the feats that they've, achieved so far and are so close to achieving moving forward. Both have been fortunate enough to raise the Stanley Cup a couple of times and were big parts of those things. Drew Doughty continues with his ice time to, lead everybody in the league at his age, and he plays against the opposition's top players night in and night out. Anze Kopitar, he's just such a cerebral player. He's probably most appreciated and respected by his teammates, the opponents that he plays against, the coaches that coach against him, that recognize how good a player he is. Statistically, other guys will have better statistics, but when you look at a complete player, Anze Kopitar is that 200-foot player. And, Drew Doughty plays a very youthful game, even at his age right now. There's a lot of kid and character in him. Kopitar is a little bit more reserved when it comes to the ice, the discipline, the poise that he plays with, but both bring an element to this team that has allowed these young players to be able to thrive and grow. You look at where Adrian Kempe's career has gone. That's because of guys like Kopitar up front. Back on the blue line, Doughty's had that same effect on guys like Mikey Anderson, Jordan Spence, Brant Clark, all the young guys that have been able to play under, alongside him or beside him or watch him in practice. So these guys continue to just keep being of such value to the team, both on and off the ice, and they will for years to come because of the impression that they leave when they're out there.
Well, we still don't know who the Kings are going to play in the first round of the playoffs. We still have 2 days left of the NHL regular season. We're going to talk about possible playoff matchups here coming up in just a second on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. I have to admit, I have a competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side enjoys playing Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly, where you play not only one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing around with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments and earn huge rewards. So get them in the game and join your friends as well. Go to Monopoly Go, and you can check that out free. It's on the App Store and on Google Play. That is Monopoly Go. All right, we are back with Daryl Evans. And by the way, the LA Kings face the Chicago Blackhawks, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, Thursday night in the regular season finale. You can catch every moment of that hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings, and you can listen to Daryl Evans on the call, along with Nick Nixon and Jim Fox. Daryl, I talked about this on Tuesday's show. Coaches and players are obviously never going to say publicly, we want to play the Canucks or we don't want to play the Stars. But as a former player, do the players talk amongst themselves about what team they would rather play, or maybe the team they match up better against when it comes playoff time, or no?
I don't think there's that much of that goes on. I'm sure there's, just in casual conversation, especially the way things have been this year, the parity in the NHL, things have basically changed every day for the last 2 weeks and will continue to do so for the next 48 hours. Kings are down to 3 teams that they could play, in the first round. But again, it's taking care of your own game, making sure you're at your best. You could limp into the postseason and not be playing well. That's not the way you want to go in. Regardless of who you play against, they're probably going to, chew you up and spit you out. So take care of your game. Every opponent that you play against, there's going to be things that you say, we've got an edge in, they've got an edge in. How does it match up? I think in all 3 opponents that the Kings could play against right now, I think potentially could be great series. Vancouver, the Kings have played well against them this year. But again, Vancouver possibly could have the best record in the West Conference. Edmonton, we all know Edmonton, led by McDavid and Draisaitl. Those 2 guys, they're top heavy with those guys, and they give that team a chance each and every night. But again, the Kings have matched up well against them this year. I think the changes that they've made, the growth that they've shown over the last couple of years, could pay dividends when it comes to a playoff matchup for the 3rd straight year. It's what you've learned. I know the Kings feel they have a lot to prove against the Edmonton Oilers. The Dallas Stars are a team that the Kings didn't have success against in the regular season. There's some underlying factors that play in there. The games against Dallas, 2 of them were back-to-back for the Kings. They got in late. One was the end of a 6-game road trip. The other one was another road trip. Didn't get into about 3 o'clock in the morning. And they're a little bit on the fatigue side. Not to say that, that's an excuse, but I think the games, even though the series was swept by Dallas, at moments of games, they're a lot closer. I think Dallas is a very deep hockey club, but there's no point in saying I'd rather play this team because if you get another team or something like that, or the team that you pick, all you're doing is adding fuel to their game. Take care of your own game. If you don't play well, you're not going to win anyway, so it doesn't matter who you play.
Well, let's just, for the people out there, let them know kind of where we are in the second to last day of the regular season. You've got Dallas with 111 points. They have clinched the Central Division. They're currently the number 1 seed in the West, but they have not clinched that yet because Vancouver is just 2 points behind them with 109 points. They beat Calgary last night 4-1, and they have a shot to still be the number 1 overall seed in the West. Edmonton's pretty much locked into that number 2 spot in the Pacific, 104 points. Vegas beat Chicago last night 3-1, so they have moved past the Kings into that 3rd spot in the Pacific. They've got 98 points. Nashville is locked into the number 1 wild card. They've got 99 points. And then you've got the Kings, 97 points. Right now, LA is the number 2 wild card team, and right now they would face the Dallas Stars in the first round of the playoffs. Dallas has 1 game left tonight against St. Louis. If they win that game, they will clinch the number 1 seed in the West. Canucks have 1 game left at Winnipeg on Thursday. If Dallas doesn't win in regulation and Vancouver wins that game, they would be the number 1 seed and potentially face the Kings in the first round. Edmonton, 2 games left. One of them tonight in Arizona. It's the final Coyotes game in Arizona for a while, so that one could be a very interesting scene down there in Tempe. We mentioned the Kings have 1 game left, and then Vegas has 1 game left. They host the Ducks on Thursday, so we need the Ducks to do their SoCal neighbors a little favor maybe in that one. But as I mentioned, it does kind of look like the Kings could face the Stars. Maybe I don't know if there's any need to do it in the sense, but I think that's probably the likely matchup. I would be surprised if the Ducks do beat Vegas, which we would need to have happen. But in that matchup, I wonder if you look at it as, you know what, it's going to be a very difficult matchup. But if the Kings could somehow beat the Stars, I think they would prove to themselves they could probably beat anybody on the way to the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it would be a huge confidence boost if they could do it. But what are the difficulties that maybe the Dallas Stars would bring the Kings?
Well, I always look at the first round of the playoffs as the hardest round to win, because you're going from regular season play to postseason play, and there's a significant difference there. And I think once you find a way to succeed in the postseason, all of a sudden you start to get into a little bit of a rhythm. Dallas as a team, there's a lot of depth on their team. They can score goals. They defend well. They get good goaltending. Special teams are very good. So you have to bring your best game in order to beat them. And that's pretty much the same to be said for anybody that you play against. But Dallas, they do have experience. The Kings are familiar with them. You look at guys like Pavelski on that team that the Kings played against for so many years. Ben, that has been around for so long. Sagan, those type of players. In goal, Ottinger's done a really good job for them. But again, I think if the Kings execute their game to its top level, they can compete with anybody. And then in the 7-game series, it's the game-to-game shuffling, like what adjustments you make if you lost the game? What adjustments will you make if you won the game? Because the other team's going to be able to make some changes there. So I think it's a situation against Dallas. You're going to need everybody on board. You're not going to be able to have any passengers. And like all postseason play, you don't want to give the opposition the upper hand by taking unnecessary penalties. So you got to play intense, you got to play physical, and you got to be engaged. But there's a fine line there. You can't go overboard.
It looks like the Kings are going to be the 8th seed. That's not set in stone, but we all know that back in 2012, the Kings were an 8th seed and they went on to win the Stanley Cup. Is there anything at all similar about this team that in any way reminds you of 2012?
Yes, in some ways, yes, but I think the team as a whole, it's built differently. I think because of 212, maybe there wasn't as much of an expectation. I think there's a greater expectation from this team, so I think the pressure's a little bit greater, being that they've been to the postseason for the last couple of years and have not been able to win a series yet. That adds a little bit more pressure. But I think that pressure comes from within as well. I think there's a greater expectation from the group. There's a greater expectation from management. So this is showtime. You've got to go out there. It's you got to put it all out there and find a way to succeed. You learn a lot about the character of these guys. I think management has given them a lot of weapons to add and changes that they've made to be the best that they can be. So now it's up to the players, and we all know it's a fine line. The parity in the NHL right now is very, very, very at a high level. So you've got to execute when the opportunities come. You got to earn, make your breaks, earn your breaks, and then you got to take advantage of them. And defensively, you hope for a little bit of puck luck in the defensive zone, but that's what makes the game so great at this time of year.
He is former Kings winger and current analyst Daryl Evans. Follow him on X Twitter. He is at Daryl Evans 15, and be sure to check out his work along with Nick Nixon and Jim Fox on Bally Sports West and the Kings iHeart Audio Network. Daryl, as always, thank you for your time. Look forward to seeing what the Kings do in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and it is an exciting time of the year.
All right, Eddie, keep up the great work, and we'll look forward to catching up with you further down into the playoffs.
Yes, that would be fantastic. Hope to talk to you in a few weeks when the Kings are still playing some hockey. Thank you, Daryl.
All right, have a great one.
You too. That is Daryl Evans, and we always thank him so much for his time. Really appreciate it. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, Thursday we'll have a preview of that regular season finale against the Blackhawks, update you on the playoff matchups. Friday, we'll recap that game, talk about who the Kings are going to play in the playoffs. And of course, on Friday, it means another Kings fan feedback show. If you want to get an email in for that, lockedoneddie@gmail.com is the address, EDDIE. And as always, you can leave your comments on the YouTube episode comment section as well. And stay interactive with the show by following us on X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on Thursday. And as always, go Kings, go.